Hello everybody, thanks for tuning in on today's video. We've got the Heat Blur F-4E loaded up in DCS with some 500-pound snake eyes and a set of 4 cluster bomb units, Mark 20 rock eyes. And the job today is going to be aerial interdiction. We are going to be killing some trucks on the Ho Chi Minh Trail. The scenery won't match the historical record because, as many of you are well aware, in DCS there is no Vietnam map as of yet. As I understand it from Wags, one of the directors at DCS, or DCS's owners at Eagle Dynamics, the architecture of the game right now just won't support a true to nature Vietnam map. Many folks may not realize this, but I think it's worth walking through a little bit of the logistics while we turn on the jet here. For a true to life Vietnam map to work, you couldn't just take a snapshot of Vietnam proper and then call that the map, because the U.S. Air Force strike missions into North Vietnam mostly came from Thailand. So you would have to include Thailand in order to really model the missions that happened in the Rolling Thunder and Linebacker campaigns. So including Thailand means you would have to obviously include Laos and Cambodia, and basically in order for a Vietnam map to work in this game, you would basically need to include Asia from the Thailand-Myanmar border, basically all the way to the ocean, and then the northern border would be the southern Chinese border with many of those countries I just mentioned. So effectively, we're talking about a very large land area, and you would also need to include multiple different geographies. There's karst mountains, there's forests, there's valleys, rivers, plains, all kinds of different geography, and modeling that with DCS's current architecture would probably not yield a map that many of us normal humans could run. I know for my system, it would probably just melt my graphics card if I tried. So I'm sure some of the other content creators with supercomputer style systems that have 64 gig video RAM and cutting edge processors and all that, probably those people could run a Vietnam map under the current structure, but I couldn't, and I'm sure many of you all out there probably couldn't either. So recognizing that we don't have a Vietnam map, and until the platform is updated on the Vulcan system, it's not going to be in the cards anytime soon. So that's a long way of explaining that today's map is going to be Syria. Syria is going to stand in for Vietnam here. Although in truth, the mission that I'm modeling here actually would have happened in Laos, because there too is a completely separate war theater that many people don't realize actually happened. So much of the conversation around Vietnam, as we connect our start cart and get this jet going, much of the conversation around Vietnam is around the Linebacker and Rolling Thunder stuff, the things that happen in North Vietnam. That's where most of the MiG engagements happen. That's where the interdiction strike missions were mostly publicized. And those are the missions that most people think about if they're talking about the air war in Vietnam, right? But meanwhile, in some ways, in a much larger scale than what happened in the North, the U.S. Air Force and U.S. Navy were prosecuting an interdiction campaign in Laos that was almost at times more extensive than what was happening in the North. And the objective of these missions, under code names like Operation Steel Tiger and Operation Bearable, was to basically destroy the truck traffic that was resupplying the South Vietnamese guerrillas. The strategic situation was pretty straightforward. The U.S. couldn't march on North Vietnam because if we had landed the 101st Airborne and decided to just take over the country, as we did in World War II with Germany, the Chinese would have certainly intervened, just as they had done in Korea a decade or two earlier. And if the Chinese had intervened, there's no material way that the U.S. could win that sort of head-on engagement. And the same applied also if the Soviet Union intervened on the side of North Vietnam openly as well. So if those two developments had happened, we would have lost pretty decisively, and this was an outcome that kept President Lyndon B. Johnson awake at night, almost to the point where he handcuffed the military severely to ensure that escalation that went to that direction didn't take place. So the thinking was by the doctorate holders in the Pentagon under then Secretary of Defense Robert S. McNamara was to kill the truck traffic, because the thinking was North Vietnam was resupplying the guerrillas in South Vietnam, and the guerrillas in South Vietnam needed beans, bombs, and bullets to do their job as an army, just like every armed force on the planet needs to be an armed force. So the thinking was, by destroying the truck traffic, the South Vietnamese guerrillas would be starved of resources, and by being starved of resources, they'd be unable to prosecute their campaign of military and insurgent operations against the government of South Vietnam, which of course we were friendly with at the time. So since a land invasion of North Vietnam was off the table, the next best thing in the minds of the people at the time was to just stop the traffic. And that led to a very long campaign against a pathway that was called the Ho Chi Minh Trail. This trail ran from North Vietnam down along the Laotian mountains and jungle into South Vietnam, exiting at various strategic points like Adipo and Chapon. So what the U.S. military did is they would concentrate firepower on convoys at many of these passes and congregation points for the road systems to interdict the truck resupply of South Vietnam. So this effort to kind of strangle the materiel of the guerrillas exacted a pretty high price, something like 20,000 North Vietnamese transport engineers, drivers, soldiers, and irregulars, in addition to North Vietnamese military members, died on the pathway leading down to South Vietnam. And many of the threats weren't just the U.S. bombing them. There was disease, there were accidents, there were crashes and issues because you have a monsoon rain and a big mountain range, and this is just not an environment that lends itself to mechanical activity. Trying to haul thousands of tons of material through mountain ranges and monsoon is just not a good time for any military group. So a lot of those casualties came from consequences of doing that, in addition to the aerial bombing. So this was the day-to-day kind of life for a lot of F-4 Phantom crews. I know the focus is usually on MiG activity, right? Offensive counter-air, defensive counter-air, fighting the MiGs. But really, the day-to-day life of an F-4E pilot in Vietnam was basically this. They would step to the jet, look at the forms, get in, fly out, and do some kind of air-to-ground operation. And this was what most of them did for 6 months, 100-odd missions, or whatever their rotation happened to be. And this part of the story, I feel, doesn't really get a lot of attention. Folks want to pay attention to the MiG-21 duels, right? When Robin Olds and his berry band of 8th Tactical Fighter Wing people, Satan's Angels, shot down 7 Vietnamese MiGs, right? And then you have the combat actions of May 10th, 1972, when a whole bunch of MiGs got shot down, and the U.S. had new aces on both the U.S. Navy as well as the Air Force side. But what happened in between on a day-to-day basis, right? And this is what that was. A lot of flying up, a lot of bombing trucks and truck parks and that kind of thing, and dodging AAA in the process. So this is a mission that I suspect may not get a lot of cool guy play, but this is what most F4 crews did. So Heat Blur's done a really good job with this thing, and it's kind of funny how if you read what, like these guys' memoirs, when they talk about what they did and how they felt when they flew this jet. It's weird how playing it really puts you in their heads, kind of in a third party sort of way. When one pilot once wrote that sitting in the F4 made him feel like a badass, I kind of thought, well, yeah, of course, fighter pilots are gonna, say good things about the planes they're flying. But playing this module, it's so well done and so realistically set that flying this thing, I can kind of understand where he's coming from. And it's scary because this game is making the words from his book into something a bit more tangible, and it kind of elevates the whole concept of turn on a game and go play. It's like, well, in a weird kind of way, we're reliving history, and I feel like flying this is in its own little way paying tribute to what those people did 50 something years ago over the Ban Karai Pass. So I'll hush up for a moment while we get this F-4E ready to taxi on down. Cut out some bits here because basically it's just me sitting and waiting for the INS to align. And we'll make a note here, and I'll actually mention it a bit later when we get to the combat zone too. But when the INS is aligned, you want to align it, you want to do a full alignment, because a lot of the avionics in the F4, such as the boxes in the jet that do the calculation for like the AIM-7 launching, as well as the dive toss, which will be key if you're doing air-to-ground things like we're doing now, those computers, such as they are relative to modern standards, rely on input data from the inertial navigation or INS system, which means if you start the airplane with a course or memory heading alignment, there's a possibility that that data is going to be passed into those avionics, with resulting degradation in the performance of your AIM-7 launches or your dive toss passes. So to ensure that these avionics systems work to the best they can, I recommend again that when you start cold, you start with the INS fully aligned. And while that does mean you have to sit on the pad and wait about 7 to 10 minutes for the thing to align, it is worth doing so that when you get to the combat zone, you have the best performance available for your avionics and the best data available for them to deliver the best performance. That all makes sense. Gonna taxi on down here, take a look at these wonderful F-4Es.
Roger that.
So, one request I wish we could do, maybe this is something somebody can weigh in on in the comments, but I wish we could park the F4s as static displays with optional weaponry attached, like fuel tanks or bombs or kind of, sidewinders, whatever. I know I suspect that the game that may not let you do that out of the box, but if there's a mod or something that lets you do that, chime in the comments, because I would love to have more realistic displays in my games. And hop in the back here, flick some switches and turn some knobs, and kind of appreciate the view from the back. Show some love to the Wizzos, because among other things, I just want to point out that the top Air Force ace of Vietnam was a Wizzo. Yes, Chuck de Bellevue is a qualified pilot now, or not now, but he's a qualified pilot after the fact, I should say. But he started off getting his 6 MiG kills as a backseater. So he did that with, of course, Captain Steve Ritchie in the front, and later on he did it with a different F-4E crew, as he would put it, a different nose gunner, later on in the war, and that's how he got his last 2 kills to put him at 6. So top Air Force ace, backseater, let that be known. Checking our switches here. Something really cool about just taxiing down the way with the canopy open, just trundling along in this big old muscle car of a jet. Feels really freaking cool. I have to give my props to Heatblur for capturing this so well. Let's take a moment and just savor the view of quote-unquote Thailand. know folks like to call the F-4E big ugly, and if triumph of engine power over aerodynamics, but in its day it was an aerodynamic marvel. This was an airplane that in the early 1960s could fly Mach 2, carry tens of thousands of pounds of payload, and could shoot down a whole bunch of airplanes with, at the time, was one of the longest range missile systems on the globe. And it could do this while being safely controllable down to 163 knots, which is kind of amazing when you consider that at the time this airplane first entered service, we were flying stuff like the F-100 that was killing about 30% of its crew, or not killing, but we lost 30% of the airplanes, and the vast majority of them were in low speed landing accidents, administrative issues and things like that. At one point, somebody I think said that if you lose once a week, somebody once said we were losing them once a week, actually. So yeah, this was a pretty big step forward as we switch on our stability yaw and our pitot heat, and that's probably why the F-4E Phantom II, coming from an era when we were losing a fighter jet every week because of some mishap, is still in service today with the frontline NATO air forces of Turkey and Greece, and is still in service with the Islamic Republic of Iran at the time of this video. So 60 years still in frontline service says something about the jet, doesn't it? And that's something I think folks don't realize, because a lot of the Cold War jets have been retired, but 60 years, here we are, still flying. I mean, geez, think about that number, folks. Like, not 10, not 20, not 30, not 40, not even 50. We're talking 60 years after it was introduced, it's still flying. So perhaps one day I'll see one in person. Never know. Anyways, as we sit and get ready to take off here, pretty simple technique. Just keep the stick all the way back while we advance the throttles. Once the nose starts coming up, you bring the stick forward slowly. If you don't have a force feedback stick, what this will basically do is keep your stick centered as the jet begins to lift off. If you have a force feedback stick, obviously the stick will come forward on its own, just like the real aircraft did. So if you're having trouble with your F4 porpoising or kind of going unstable in pitch as you come off the ground, it's probably because you're holding the stick back a little too long. What you want to do is just bring it forward and control your nose position as you come up, and suck up the landing gear and put the flaps up. So now we're coming off the runway, getting ready to do some work on the Ho Chi Minh Trail. Just in your mind's eye, picture all the brown down there is green. So that silver thing on the left front rail is a ECM pod. That's an ALQ-131. This is a bit anachronistic because they didn't have the ALQ-131 in service at the time of Vietnam. This was something that was implemented long afterward. However, in the game, we do not have the ALQ-110 or the ALQ-71 available, which were the original first generation ECM pods that were deployed in Vietnam. If anyone knows if Hitler plans to implement those, that would be cool. Just put that in the comment section below. Anyways, we'll need that a little bit later for reasons that will be clear in a moment. So right here, this is our objective. We need to destroy or disable as many of those trucks in the center of the screen as we can. To prevent us from doing that, there is a large posse of various AAA emplacements. We've got 37 millimeter, 57 millimeter, 100 millimeter radar directed flat guns, and we have 12.7 millimeter technical mounted machine guns. So the AAA picture is as close to what was faced by the people in Laos as I can reasonably make it within the bounds of my computer system limitations. As I understand it, there were actually more guns in the theater than what we see here, but again, even with what I can put in here within the bounds of my RAM and graphics card and processor, that's a lot. And yeah, you're going to see what all that stuff looks like pretty shortly. So in real life, what they would do is there would be a forward air controller, probably somebody in like an OA 1 or an OV10 Bronco, something like that. They would fly low and slow, and they would call us on the radio, or we would call them on the radio from the F-4. We would say, hey, we're a flight of 1 with payload X checking in, and they would say, yeah, well, here's what we've got for you. There's a convoy headed down this road. If you look at landmark X or point Y on the map and then direct your eyes over here, look this way, you will then see the convoy, and then they would talk you on through the 9-line process on engaging it. So pretty routine stuff. And as you get 50, 60, 70, 80 missions in, you would obviously get very good at doing all this stuff. But this is the first time I'm doing it, so I'm taking my time, and I'm doing this relatively conservatively because I'm not trying to get shot down out here. Also, something worth pointing out, if you were shot down in North Vietnam, there was a non-zero chance you probably would have been killed on landing by some angry villagers with pitchforks and farm implements. But if you were intercepted by official authorities like the police or the National Guard of North Vietnam or the military, you would be taken prisoner, and while not necessarily treated humanely, you also wouldn't be executed on sight. That was a different story in Laos. In Laos, the communist militias down there did not take prisoners. If you were shot down and had to eject in certain parts of Laos and you weren't picked up by combat search and rescue, your head would be forcibly removed from your body. So nasty business, and that apparently might have been a merciful fate compared to what some pilots experienced when they were shot down and captured by the Pathet Lao. So yeah, while we don't have to necessarily worry about being killed if we get shot down physically, I'm not a fan of riding the parachute, so we're just going to do our best to fly this mission within the parameters of what the real pilots would have had to deal with, and that includes coming back safe, because I'm not trying to get shot down, and I'm not trying to get Jester, chatty as he is, turned into a POW either, because the only thing worse than flying with this guy is sharing a cell wall with him for the next 7 years. Especially if it's something I screwed up that led to him being captured and us being locked up. So, we're going to just cruise on over to the AO here. As we get ready to fly in, I actually want to ask you guys if you want me to post more missions that are kind of long play stuff. I know most DCS content trends toward quick dogfights and short multiplayer sessions, but I don't see a lot of content on like realistic single player stuff, and I don't know if it's because people just don't like it, or if content creators are kind of gun shy about showing their mistakes maybe. Let me know what you all think in the comment section of if you want to see more long play stuff or not. I'll tell you what I would like to see though. As we take a look at the view from the back, I would like to see Heat Blur bring back the sunglasses option in the next update. I know it's not a tactically big deal, but man, when they rolled out this new update and I found out that the sunglasses keybind had been deleted, I was so bummed. I was like, man, that was so cool. Just strapping on this big F4, putting on some Ray-Bans and going hunting MiGs. That's just cool, And then when you have the soundtrack feature as well, where you can load music that you want, and yeah, I just want my shades back, folks. So there's the convoy. Again, in real life, we would have a forward air controller telling us where to look and pointing us in the right direction, as well as calling out when to drop and what to use. But in this case, I am my own forward air controller. I'll have to play with the mission editor to see if we can get a FAC in the game. I don't want to use like an A10 or something, because that would obviously be anachronistic, but more to come on that. So we're armed up here, going to do a dive toss pass with the snake eyes. We're not going to set them to, we're not going to do a low level 500 knot delivery That would be cool, but unfortunately wiping out the convoy in one high-speed pass is just not going to happen for reasons that you are very soon going to see. So we're going to come on down. This is one of the reasons also why you want to cold start the airplane with the INS aligned in full, because the INS's data is used by the dive toss computer to do its math. So if you use a course alignment, the dive toss is going to get course aircraft position data, which is going to have effects on your accuracy. And there's the AAA. Ooh boy. Pucker factor max. Oh, what the heck was that? No time to worry. Let's just get out of here. Full power, afterburner, and start dancing. I'm going to start jinking, because, oh man, I hope that boom wasn't something important. And, oof. I do not like AAA. It's right up there with student loan bills. Just not fun. Not fun. Coming off target there. Now this is the time when in real life a forward air controller would chime in and say, hey, this is the number of trucks you've hit, good hits, medium hits, or God, you suck, go do something else for a living. They wouldn't say that, but they'd get the point across a different way. Clearly we've done some damage, so I'm going to make some switch changes here. Knocked out quite a few trucks, it looks like, down there. So now that you all see how this is working out here, kind of gives you an insight into what these pilots dealt with when they were flying their 100-odd missions into combat. Because, yeah, this is essentially easy mode relative to what the AAA picture was for the people who did this for real. It's not easy to see all the lead that's coming in, but as I'm coming in, there's all kinds of lead all over the place. I'm jinking, I'm switching on my cluster bombs, and I plan to do a pass, but the time it took me to flip on the rails and to make the switchology things happen meant that I couldn't engage the dive toss context menu quick enough to complete the pass. So that was a dry run, and yuck. Yeah, doing a dry one when there's like hundreds of rounds of AAA going off near you is not a good time. So my original plan coming out here was to make 2 passes, maybe 3, and then have the cluster bombs, deploy the cluster bombs on a unique pass, but that's a lot of freaking AAA, and I'm not trying to stick around here and make myself a guest of these people. So I'm going to just do 1 pass. As I said in Vietnam, 1 pass, haul ass. We're going to roll in here, put the afterburner up, all the rails are on. I know the ballistics for the 500-pound bombs that I've entered into the bombing computer and what Jester has is not going to be the same for the cluster bombs, but you know what? Sometimes you just have to experiment and roll the hard 6. So that's what I'm doing here, rolling in, doing my Jester context menu thing, so we have the dive toss ready. I'm just going to punch off everything I got on the rails right there. And if the cluster bombs hit, great. If they don't, well, so be it. Coming off target there. Snake Eyes did their thing, and the cluster bombs, as I anticipated, are not on target. But it's okay. I'm still alive. Airplane still works, and we're coming off target. This would be the time when I would tell the FAC, hey, we got 20 millimeter, and that's it. And doing a gun pass in that kind of AAA environment is just not a smart idea. Incidentally, one of the reasons why the F-4E got the gun was not for air-to-air. A lot of folks focus in on that, but the primary reason why it got the gun was because of this situation. Sometimes you needed to have airplanes that were available to do on-call CAS and strafe, and if you don't have a gun, that's pretty hard to do. So yeah, we'll wrap the mission pretty much here. Thanks everybody for tuning in as we exit this rather unfriendly patch of sky. Once again, thank you all for tuning in, and if you're a subscriber, I want to extend my heartfelt thanks to you for supporting the channel. If If you like my content here, consider subscribing so you'll be notified of my next video, and check out some of the other aviation-related DCS and model review content that I have in the channel. Thanks everybody for tuning in once again, because your support I do not ever take for granted, and we'll catch you all in the next one.